That's cool. I mean, so then talk like, how does that filter into the new record? And if you could just talk about the process of the new record, because it's I you were kind enough to share with me an advanced copy of it, and I loved it. My only thing that was challenging for me was having to stop each track and start it up again, because it's like it was individual tracks, and it really it sounds like something that really needs to be listened to, complete.
Wow, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because part two is uncut. So we had so much material that day. I actually made 2 records. So one of them I'm just hanging on to until next year. Part 2 is just an entire 40-minute chunk with no edits at all.
Cool. I like it. Yeah.
It's in a silent way. It's side A and side B of vinyl. I want to release it on vinyl only. It's mastered for vinyl. It's the right, length, duration for the 2 sides of vinyl record. And that so we're already talking about the next record. The next record is called Call to Action, Call to Prayer. It's more descriptive of what goes on in the studio, but it's far less accessible. Just in the sense that it's just a continuous improvisation with no breaks. So what you're hearing on this record, Destiny Calling, is I took our improvisations and I just trimmed the beginning and end of these long 30 to 40 minute events so it sounds like a song, right?
Wow. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So there are no edits. Well, there's no overdubs.
Okay,
it's just taking chunks out and moving stuff closer together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's edits, there's like cuts.
Right, I understand.
It's continuous. So like every track, that is the beginning of what happened and the end of what happened. It just wasn't like that abrupt.
Right, okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
One place, and I probably wouldn't even be able to find it, where I had to take William Parker's bass line and repeat it for a couple bars until the whole thing settled. So in that sense, I guess that's kind of an overdub. It's just kind of compressing everything, so it.
Sure.
Fits.
Yeah. Right.
So I can tell you how it works. And the very first thing on the record is the very first thing we did when the microphones turned on, and the very last is the very last.
Gotcha.
Generally in exact order. There might be 1 or 2 things moved, but it's generally that's what happened the first thing that day and the last.
Mm-hmm.
I extracted a whole chunk out of the middle that became a second record.
Right. But all done in one day.
All done within 4 hours.
Wild. Okay.
It was a continuous 4-hour performance event.
Wow. And so, completely improvised, or was there some written material for it?
Well, okay, so I wrote.
It sounds like there's themes.
None of them actually made it into the record.
Wow. Okay.
One tune, Sparks, is a tune I wrote. That's the title of my first record. So the last track on there is an actual tune.
Mm-hmm.
All of the sketches that I wrote in the days leading up to the recording,
sure.
I only shared it with the pianist when we got there, with the keyboard, with the organist, Brad Whiteley. He's the only one who knew I wrote anything down. So I just threw these, couple bars, sketches. I threw 5 of them at him, just, and I would start playing it, and I would show him where I was on the page, and he would start playing a version of it, and we would see what happens. Oftentimes, 90% of what I played in the record, I just deleted.
Wow, okay.
So most of what, there's very little of guitar on the record.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, it's definitely not a showcase of your talents. It's a musical experience much more than a display of somebody's ability.
Well, yeah, I'm not interested in that at all. So I don't. Even people I love very much, all the records are identical. They all sound exactly the same. You can play fast. or whatever. None of my records sound like that. You know what I mean? My records, you can drop the needle on any one of my 9 records and you'll know immediately what tune it is. Nothing sounds the same over 9 records that it did on any other part of any other record. And I really pride myself in that. I write tunes very specifically so they're contained, right? When you come to a situation where you're playing with Juma and William Parker and Daniel as the Griots, the 4 of us as the Griots, but I'm also playing with Iron City simultaneously. So I'm actually playing in the middle of 2 different trios on this record. So really all I'm doing on the record is some version of conducting.
Right, okay.
What I'm playing on the guitar is just information to just keep the thing happening.
Right.
Because I know what William sounds like, I know what Juma sounds like, I know what Daniel sounds like, and then I know what my guys are capable of. So I'm basically just I'm just kind of like subconsciously veering them into these directions that now we're playing behind Daniel, now we're playing behind Juma, now we're playing behind William. Right? And it's and the sort of the soloist is always like flowing, right?
Right,
so,
yeah.
You know, Juma says that, he calls that running. One time he told me, he said, it's all right to run. I was playing the drum and I was laying it down underneath something he was playing, and he said, it's all right to run, which means he'll take it now and I can solo, basically. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a game of duck, duck, goose. Everybody's sitting in a circle and it's, you know, grooving away where it is. One person gets up and runs around and does something different. Then the music kind of moves over to what he was doing, and it becomes that. And then it comes over to what I was doing. Now it goes over to what William Parker was doing. Now it's back to me. Now it's Daniel for a long time. And it's Juma. And it's me again. Right? It's like, and you can't tell that in a recording studio because it's all flat. Everybody is equally loud.
Right.
So in the editing process is assigning the beginning and ending of a track. It's also making everybody of the 6 of us louder or quieter. So it's a constant recipe where I'm flipping the 2 people who are soloing and the 4 people who are accompanying.
Right. So it's almost as if you're using the editing process as an arranging process.
Well, it's not the arranging process. I remember I had to do it the next day, so I remembered what happened.
Okay, fair.
It's not an arranging process. I knew we know what's going on.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But you can't deliver that in a recording studio because everything is flat. There's no space between anyone. It's an it's a false way to present what it is we're actually doing. So I very quickly start editing. Like that was on Sunday. The next morning, I was back in the studio. And I was already like, okay, on this tune, William started this thing, and then Daniel picked it up, and then me and Brad were here. Like I had to go and like put it back in the right order in terms of who was louder and quieter. And I had to do that quickly before I forgot.
Wow, that's a really unique way of doing it, man.
Yeah, well, I'm good at this. I've done, you know, I'm used to making records very quickly on no budget.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I make all my records on just what I can scrape by from my restaurant gigs.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's all done in my head, you know, the weeks leading up to it. I just need to go in, have somebody capture it, and then be very quick on the computer later. My real collaborator is Chris Soulet at Trading 8 Studios. He's incredibly facile, you know, on the computer, on Pro Tools, I guess it's called, right? So, and he's engineered every one of my records.
I really enjoy it, but it did channel a little bit of that bitches brew in a silent way. You know, if I had to categorize it or at least explain it to somebody, what's the record like? I would maybe use that as a possible example, although it's not that, of course. But you know, there is elements of that sound in what you're doing. It seems.
For me, the sort of elevator pitch for the record or the tagline is "In a Silent Way" meets, you know, early Santana when they were rehearsing to make the album Abraxas.
Yeah, yeah.